Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reviews where today we have ourselves a track by an acts named Boy Blu titled Take Me Away. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves the track on the screen on YouTube and we're going to be listening through this track from start till finish. And we're going to hear what we think. Let's go. What do we got? Oh, synths. Great sound design. I like how... Oh. We did not mess around getting into that theme. That was actually a heck of an intro because we had the kind of swirly synth and then guitars, bass, drums, and vocals all at one. It took me by surprise. I got to hand it to them. That was really well done.
Then one day the rains came and I heard a distant thunder and the lightning in your eyes rendered me blind. Take me away now. Take me away.
Great parallel liner there. Harmony was. Nice fizziness with the tone there, and I'm appreciating the studio production. Like, there's lots of interesting things going on in the stereo field there. They've clearly been very creative about the panning, but there's been no kind of decisions here that have been too out there. I really enjoy the way it sounds. Major tone. Cool response with those leads, nice. This is incredible. Like, I like the range here tonally. These chord progressions are fantastic. It's unpredictable. And that's part of what makes it so interesting, you know? Are we violining on the guitars there? Cool. That's cool. I mean, I like it. And then, yeah, it sounds like it's going to go into a minor, but then it goes into a major there. It raises itself up. It's really kind of peppy, like you've got these almost staccato-ish kind of lines here where we're not letting the notes at the end of the vocal lines hold. And it gives a lot more presence to the guitar and synth parts that are going on in that lead section, because I know that the vocals and the synths are kind of occupying a similar frequency spectrum there. It's great for an octave range. Ping pong delay here with interesting sort of like a tremolo on those guitars or vibrato. Poignant lead solo. Yeah, I'm really glad we're continuing there. It just felt a little bit too safe to finish on that note. Yeah, work across the existing scale shape or the harmony there. That was an interesting way to resolve it. I kind of dig it. I've just realized as well there are these vocal harmonies in the high end as well, which is giving the vocals a bit more presence and among the mix here. Like, not that I'm... Honestly, there's so much interesting stuff to sort of look at within this track without the vocals being considered, but obviously that's still the focal point, aside from the solo sections. lots of sweeps.
But I'll take my chances on the run. Take me away now. Take me away forever.
Nice use of repeat as well, forever, ever, you know, like that, just kind of fading out there as if it's the person's last sort of message to you before they fade from existence.
Take me away forever. Take
Interesting
me away
concept to make a song about.
Take me away.
And the drums as well, like the drums have just been consistent with their groove the entirety of the time aside from occasional fills. They're so supportive, it's great. Interesting chance there. Is this kind of like a spiritual awakening or something like that they're having where they've realized that their life is not what they want it to be and they wanted to go back to something alternative or back to where they used to be? And we're back there with that swirly kind of synth that we had at the start, back where we started. Wow. Wow, that was a really fascinating track. What do I even want to say about this? Because this is the conclusion of my review of Take Me Away by Boy Blu. Like, what do I think this track is about? I think it's about someone who has maybe been mulling over a change or that they need something different. And they've been getting told by this other person, yo, no, seriously, if you stick with me, things are going to be okay. I've got a lot to show you. It's going to be worth your while. But eventually, you know, the woman singing, they are just like, nah, I want to go back to how things are used to be. Thank you. I'd rather, please take me away, you know. So I think that's what it's about. It's longing for an alternative and eventually making the difficult decision to go to that, you know. It's really interesting. You know, it talks like creative expression, the sacrifices I know many musicians have made for like life versus their creative endeavors. You know, it's a tricky thing to balance, but I think it's a really good thing to talk about in music, and I think it's a great story to tell. There's probably a bit more nuance to it, but that's the kind of main message I got from it. The vocals were great, you know, really tuneful, great control of head and chest voice there, very expressive and emotive, very believable and authentic in their story, made sense with the story that we were told there. Lots of range there with the way we're expressing ourselves in the verse versus the chorus, etc. It was really interesting to listen to the lady sing, and I think that was fantastic. I can tell that they've got experience on the microphone by how comfortable it seems to be able to sort of pull all that off. And the fact that we were kept as a solo sort of texture for most of it is just the fact that we were meant to be singing the storyteller mode, so to speak, you know, so that was a great choice there. Vocals were on top of a really interesting accompaniment and an arrangement there. I mean, like for a 5-minute track, I sincerely believe this was incredibly well done. I think that there was enough in here to requisite the amount of time we had spent on it. And it's almost like we could have had more if we wanted to. But I think that the fact that we ended at that 5-minute 10 mark was absolutely fine. The main motif there is kind of made up of, you know, the kind of swirly synth we had at the start coming in with the guitar, bass, drums there to tell the story alongside the vocalist. And we had more of those synths come in alongside the hook parts there, kind of jangly chords and dispersed with distorted or overdriven parts there with the bass line that was thoroughly sort of like forgiving its lower range there, kind of supporting the chord progressions and some of the slide guitar bits and violining we had on the leads there. The drums had like an eighth note groove that kept along most of the time and was sort of, we had occasional fills, but ultimately it was there just to keep things moving. And the bass and drums working really well together to kind of work alongside the synths when they came in and the guitars, which provided the main sort of coloration in that mid-range to go alongside the vocals and the synth parts in the high end there. We had interesting choices of chords For the most part, they were relatively easy to follow with the triad choices we had there. We had like a parallel minor in the second half of the bridge there, which was kind of like a sadder kind of texture that I wasn't expecting up until we lifted up again into that chorus. But things got a bit more sort of majorous, as if we were like trying to be gentle and caring with the way we were saying that we needed to go. And for someone to take me away, we were trying to be loving with that person that we were talking to, but we also had our own needs which needed to be met. And it's a tricky situation that I'm sure a lot of people will find themselves in a life trying to choose between themselves and someone else and their needs versus the needs of others. And sometimes a compromise isn't possible, you know? So again, I think that the music emotionally, like the way it sounded, the chord choices, made for a theme which was trying to be caring and loving, but at the same time was trying to also be assertive. And I'm hoping that's what the intention was, because that would allow for a great synergy between the lyrics, the vocals, and the instrumental performance itself there. The lead parts were great, nice and articulate there, like the solo sections on the guitar. Very happy with the technique choices there. There was still a sense of minimalism, like we were trying to sort of voice the guitar as a voice rather than show how much we could shred. I don't think a shred solo would have suited the song very well, even though there's a lot of variety and versatility. Like we had like kind of chant things going with some sort of like panned drums, like some hand drums later on though. I don't know whether they were part of the same kit or an additional percussive layer. We had some interesting concepts in here that worked well purely because they weren't thrown in at once. We had the journey go over time and you were left to the imagination, like with those chants that we had later on, the oof, oh, you know, that kind of stuff. I'm not sure what that meant, but you can imagine it, and it's kind of after the story, you're left to your own devices as a listener to kind of put two and two together. It's kind of nice when you're not getting your hand held the entire time by a singer. It's nice when you're allowed to kind of have some freedom in that respect. But yeah, getting back to that solo, I think that it was really eloquently performed there. You know, the techniques we used made sense for the style of music, that kind of folk, indie kind of rock kind of groove there with even some sort of country elements or blues elements with the slides, etc. And I think that the different ingredients came together into a mix and accompaniment and arrangement that worked. And it was very articulate and very interesting to listen to. There's lots of change. Never felt as if there was any filler. Well done. The recording, mixing, and mastering, the studio production side of things was great. There was definitely dynamic range to this. There were some instruments that were loud, some that were quiet, but the craziest part is that it worked. Like for me, I could tell that we weren't trying to make it too sort of like organized or kind of fit into this block, into this square, etc. We just wanted the instruments to have their own character and personality, but also kind of sync well alongside each other. Like the leveling was fine. At the end with like the boom, ba-da-dum, the accented drums at the end were clearly louder than some of the parts of the other kit, but it wasn't bad. It worked primarily because I think we allowed ourselves headroom in the mastering chain to allow for that. We weren't sort of paranoid about trying to make it too loud or like kind of make the mix sound perfect. Like, don't get me wrong, it sounded great. It's just more, it reminds me more of the mixes from like the 70s, the 60s and 70s and 80s rather than the mixes nowadays where you've got people getting down to the 0.05 dB to try and get stuff to sync along. The guitar, bass, drums, the vocals, everything was nicely filtered, recorded and EQ'd there. Nicer use of like effects chains and stuff like that to give the vocals a bit of a kind of a dreamy texture with some of the repeaters there, the delays used there occasionally sort of going out to the sides there. Clearly an understandable fundamental understanding of the importance of like panning instruments in the sides of the stereo field, but also using automation to kind of get them to swirl around was really dope. It was, again, there were no weird resonances in the frequency spectrum. It was nice and loud without pumping. All in all, this is a really positive review of Take Me Away by Boy Blu, and hopefully you enjoyed this track. If you did, please do go show them some love. Their various social medias and their YouTube page, and stay cool and stay safe. And please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next review. Spiderhands out.